From tragic X to unthinkable betrayal, few characters in Squid Game Season 3 stirred more outrage or conversation than Myung-gi. Played by K-drama star Im Si-won, Myung-gi began as a morally gray, self-interested crypto influencer with a shaky redemption arc. But by the season's end, he had become the face of betrayal and greed, pushing viewers to their emotional limits. So what happened with his character? Because like many of you, I was caught by surprise at how drastically his character shifted between Season 2 and Season 3. I had my hopes up until the very last moment that he would somehow redeem himself, maybe even sacrifice his life for his baby. But we saw how things ended. To understand where the shift began, we first need to understand Hwang's vision for Myung-gi and what he intended for the character. While Gi-hun embodies the values Hwang hopes viewers will carry from Squid Game, Myung-gi reflects society's ills. For example, Gi-hun represents a desire for justice and empathy, while Myung-gi symbolizes the individualistic and often ruthless nature of those who prioritize their own survival in a corrupt system. While I was disappointed by how the baby was used as a plot device and how the story unfolded after she was declared a player, I can't deny that Hwang's vision and what he tried to convey through the baby was an interesting commentary on the future of humanity. The baby in Squid Game Season 3 stood as a powerful symbol for the future, both literally and metaphorically. She represented the next generation, innocent, vulnerable, and entirely dependent on the choices of those who came before her. How each character treated her became a lens into the values they held and the world they were willing to leave behind. Gi-hun and Jun-hee embodied the part of humanity willing to sacrifice themselves to protect what comes next. Gi-hun's decision to give up his life for the baby wasn't just noble, it was a moral stand against the cruelty of the games themselves. Even in the face of death, he chose compassion over survival. Though his sacrifice allowed the system to persist, it preserved one life, one symbol of uncorrupted possibility. In stark contrast, Myung-gi exposed the other extreme. Throughout the season, he insisted on his right to be part of his child's life, but his actions told a different story. He pressured Jun-hee repeatedly to share the prize money, revealing that his affection was more tied to greed than genuine care. And when it came down to the final moment, he didn't hesitate. If sacrificing his own baby meant winning, he was willing to do it. Im Si-won, who portrayed Myung-gi, offered sharp insight into this transformation. In interviews, he described Myung-gi as a survivalist with no clear moral compass. He may have cared about Jun-hee, Si-won explained, but once she died, something in him broke. After that point, Myung-gi became a different person. He had nothing left except fear and the will to win. Hwang Dong-hyuk, the show's creator, took the analysis even further. He saw Myung-gi not just as a character, but as a reflection of humanity's darker instincts. He tries to look the other way, prioritizing his own interests, immediate financial gain, and greed. He seeks his own benefit, even at the expense of the baby, Hwang said. Myung-gi represents all of us. We constantly talk about passing something on to future generations, about how the planet is at its limit, or how the national pension system will soon run dry. But when it comes down to it, no one wants to pay more into the pension fund. We aren't really living carbon-neutral lives, and we still produce just as much waste, all for our own convenience and self-interest. For Hwang, Myung-gi's desperation to kill his own child in exchange for money wasn't just character-driven horror. It was a mirror held up to society. A reminder that the real tragedy isn't just what one man is willing to do, but how common that selfishness becomes when the stakes feel abstract. Season 3 drives home a sobering truth. Humanity is capable of both deep sacrifice and profound selfishness. Gi-hun's final act reveals that even in a world designed to dehumanize, goodness can survive. But Myung-gi's fall reminds us that without accountability, even those who speak of love and responsibility may ultimately choose personal comfort over the well-being of those who will come after. In general terms, these are the stereotypes and the core message Hwang Dong-hyuk wanted to emphasize with this ending. So the real question is, where did all of this begin? Were we too blinded to see it? Did societal norms and the usual structure of television narratives shape our expectations so much that we were conditioned to always look for redemptive arcs, even when the signs clearly pointed to the opposite? And here lies, in my opinion, the biggest issue surrounding Player 333, the stark discrepancy in Myung-gi's character between seasons 2 and 3. Before entering the games, Myung-gi was a popular crypto YouTuber known online as MG Coin. He built a loyal following by promising financial freedom through high-risk investments. But when his crypto scheme inevitably collapsed, it left thousands of fans in debt, including his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Jun-hee. Rather than face the consequences, Myung-gi disappeared from the internet and his own life, buried in guilt and desperate to escape the fallout. With his reputation destroyed, finances ruined, and no one left to turn to, he entered the games as a last resort, to erase his debts and start over. But even in his very first scene, we're shown his obsession with money. He demands his phone, insisting, "I need to check on my crypto," and later asks the guards, "Are you going to compensate me if I can't trade my coins? And do you know how much money I've invested?" This money-driven mindset was the very first thing we learned about him, and it came full circle by the end of the season, where he was willing to kill his own child for the grand prize. We later learn that Jun-hee, player 222, who also enters the games, is his ex-girlfriend, and that she is pregnant with his child. This is where people started to empathize with Myung-gi. He seemed genuinely shocked to see Jun-hee there, especially realizing she hadn't gone through with the abortion they had previously agreed on. While I agree that he handled things poorly, abandoning her at such a critical moment, he could have at least checked on her, even if he was being chased by creditors. That said, I also think people are a bit too harsh when they label him trash for abandoning her while she was pregnant. From Myung-gi's perspective, they had both agreed to terminate the pregnancy. So when he saw her still pregnant, his shock was genuine, because in his mind, she had gone through with the plan. Once he realized she was in the games, he changed his vote to leave, even though the prize money wasn't enough to cover his debts. He chose to leave because she asked him to. And all of these little actions added up to create confusion. Throughout the season, he came across as morally gray, some might even say good. He appeared to genuinely care about Jun-hee, protecting her, keeping an eye on her, ensuring she was safe. He even defended Min-soo when Thanos pressured him to change his vote during the next round. These moments, combined with Jun-hee gradually starting to trust him again, softened the audience toward him. They led many of us to believe that he would play a major role in Season 3, protecting Jun-hee and the baby. But as we now know, that assumption couldn't have been more wrong. The only real warning sign from Season 2 that could have foreshadowed his character's true nature was the discussion he had with Jun-hee about their future and the baby. He suggested that they could survive the games together and combine their winnings, claiming he knew some traders who could help turn that money into something bigger. Upon hearing this, Jun-hee immediately went on the defensive. She realized that he didn't want her or the baby. He just wanted her winnings. This was the moment she began to understand that despite everything Myung-gi had gone through, he hadn't changed at all. It would have been fascinating to explore more about their past relationship and what led to their breakup. That context could have added depth to Myung-gi's obsession with money and control. The second red flag came during the Mingle game, when Myung-gi saved everyone by stepping in at the last second to meet the required number of players. An argument broke out between Hyunju and Myung-gi, during which Hyunju blamed him for Young-mi's death. Most viewers seemed to overlook Myung-gi's response, likely attributing it to the stress of the situation, but I found it very telling. He showed no remorse for Young-mi's death. Yes, they weren't close, but he didn't express even a hint of empathy. His only concern was proving that he had been right and making sure everyone knew it. That, to me, was a red flag. Instead of showing basic human empathy, his focus was entirely on validation. But even those red flags pale in comparison to the green flags he seemed to wave throughout Season 2. Starting with Season 3, however, his descent began, slowly but unmistakably. In the hide-and-seek game, he was assigned to the blue team, while Jun-hee was assigned to the red. The guards allowed players to switch teams, and Myung-gi offered to change teams with Jun-hee. Again, he seemed like he genuinely cared for her. He even offered himself as a sacrifice to ensure Jun-hee would pass the game. He said he would do everything to leave that place with her, but he also added one little word that changed everything. It changed how both Jun-hee and the audience saw him. The full phrase was, "I would kill everyone here if it meant leaving with you and the money." That final part, "and the money," revealed where his true priorities lay. But that was a subtle clue. The bigger controversy surrounding his character came with his decision to team up with Namgyu and kill more players to increase the prize money and eliminate the competition. While, in theory, this was a very effective tactic for red team players, the issue lies in the direct contrast it creates with Myung-gi's previously established character. One of the biggest moments from Season 2 was Myung-gi killing Thanos, and immediately afterward, we saw a traumatized Myung-gi who couldn't believe what he had done, that he was capable of killing someone. And yet, that same character, who was so shaken after killing his tormentor in self-defense, was now willing to kill random players for strategic gain. It felt completely off. It was as if we were watching two entirely different characters, and this drastic shift happened in just 2 episodes. Now, regarding him killing Hyunju, I don't think he regrets it. I believe his only regret was that Jun-hee saw him do it. He knew that, after witnessing that moment, she would lose all hope and feelings for him. The key detail here, regarding Myung-gi's character, is that he doesn't think he did anything wrong. In his mind, his actions were justified. He only did what he thought would improve their chances of winning, while everyone else, especially Jun-hee, saw a cold-blooded murderer. In Myung-gi's mind, it was a logical, calculated decision that any rational player would make. But even if his actions felt justified in his mind, I believe deep down, in his heart, he knew he did something wrong. That's why he avoided Jun-hee. Despite always looking out for her and the baby, he didn't approach her even once after the 4th game. I believe Jun-hee was Myung-gi's last moral anchor, but her rejection caused him to spiral even further. What truly turned people against him was how easily he gave up on Jun-hee after seeing how serious her injury was. That moment made it feel like Myung-gi suddenly saw Jun-hee as dead weight. Meanwhile, we had Gi-hun, who barely knew Jun-hee, willing to risk his life to help her cross the bridge. And this is where Hwang's vision for the 3 finalists starts to take shape. Why I began the video with that comparison. This was the moment when the characters' paths truly diverged. We see the selfishness and selflessness of humanity, represented by Myung-gi and Gi-hun. But here's the nuance. Myung-gi did care about the baby, but the deeper problem is that he cared about his own life even more. We saw that clearly when the players ganged up and tried to kill the baby. Myung-gi immediately got up from his bed and was prepared to come to Gi-hun's aid. Even during the first 2 rounds of the final game, all his manipulation of the players was done to protect the baby. Up to that point, his actions, while morally questionable, still made a lot of sense. The problem came after player 039 killed himself, and they no longer had a lunchbox ready to sacrifice. Here is the ultimate challenge, and the trigger that caused the entire fanbase to turn on him. But if you really think from Myung-gi's point of view, his actions actually made a lot of sense. He's standing in the final moments of a game that has already taken hundreds of lives. Every decision he's made up to this point has been about survival. Not trust, not friendship, just survival. And now, he's faced with a man he barely knows, in a situation where trusting the wrong person could mean instant death. Why would he suddenly gamble everything on faith? To the audience, Gi-hun is the moral compass of the show. We've seen him grieve, hesitate, and show compassion. But, to Myung-gi, he's just another player. Possibly dangerous, possibly manipulative, possibly playing him. So of course Myung-gi makes the move that gives him control. That's not cruelty. That's survival instinct shaped by the game's design. The tragedy is that we, as viewers, judge him using information he never had. We call him heartless because we know Gi-hun wouldn't have turned on him. But Myung-gi didn't have the script. He only had fear, pressure, and the brutal logic the game forced him to adopt. In that light, maybe Myung-gi didn't fail some moral test. Maybe he passed the test, the game actually gave him, the one where empathy could get you killed. We know Gi-hun refused In-ho's offer to kill all the other players before the final game, but Myung-gi doesn't know that. To Myung-gi, Gi-hun wasn't just a random player, he was a former winner, a man who had already gone through all that chaos and chose to come back. Gi-hun was the one who provoked the rebellion. He called everyone to arms, and in the end, he was the only one left standing. That's suspicious from Myung-gi's point of view. Too suspicious to blindly trust him. As far as Myung-gi knows, Gi-hun could be using the baby as a shield, a bargaining chip to ensure his own survival in the endgame. He doesn't know that Gi-hun gave up the prize money in Season 1 to try to walk away with Sang-woo. He doesn't know Gi-hun was ever willing to make that kind of sacrifice. From Myung-gi's perspective, protecting the bridge and trying to force Gi-hun to stay on the platform made logical sense. Would Myung-gi have sacrificed the baby if it came down to it? We don't know for sure. We're inclined to believe he would, but in his mind, trusting the game organizers might have seemed safer than trusting Gi-hun. Even his suspicion that Gi-hun and Jun-hee had an affair outside the game wasn't totally unfounded. Again, we're judging him based on what we know, not what he knows. Throughout Seasons 2 and 3, Myung-gi consistently showed that he valued reason above all else. Every action had to have a purpose. Even when he put aside his grudge with Namgyu, it was because doing so brought financial gain. So in his mind, Myung-gi couldn't comprehend that Gi-hun would do something so selfless without expecting something in return. And the fact that Jun-hee trusted Gi-hun over him led Myung-gi to assume the only possible explanation. The two of them must have had a relationship before the games. This is the part I really wanted to highlight. During the Mingle game, when he saved everyone, instead of showing empathy afterward, he focused solely on proving he was right. That's who he is, someone who always believes he's right. He couldn't accept that Jun-hee's decision to entrust the baby to Gi-hun came from a place of moral judgment, that she saw Myung-gi as a bad person, because in his own mind, he wasn't bad. All of his actions to him were justified. So can you really blame Myung-gi's decision here? There's no world in which he would expect anyone, especially someone physically capable, to just kill themselves for a helpless baby. Think about it. What makes Gi-hun's final decision so shocking to the characters, though not necessarily to us, the audience, is that no one in the Squid Game universe would ever expect an uninjured man to willingly die so a baby could live. We expected it because we're watching a TV show. We know Gi-hun, we've seen his arc. So yes, while Myung-gi's actions were morally horrible, his motives are understandable. I think his character gets a lot of hate, and because of that hate, he's often dismissed. But in reality, his character was beautifully built, with layers upon layers of complex emotions and contradictions. Myung-gi prioritizes his own survival and financial gain above all else, even when it means betraying or harming others. Yet despite his actions, he also shows genuine remorse, especially when faced with the idea of sacrificing his daughter. There's even an emotional breakdown that reveals the humanity he's buried under fear and desperation. His choices are driven by a complicated mix of greed, fear, and a longing for financial security, making him one of the most compelling and tragically human characters in the series. More than that, Myung-gi serves as a mirror to society. He represents the harsh reality of how often people prioritize personal gain and convenience over collective well-being. And in the final game, his desperation peaks, leading him to attempt the unthinkable. This act shows just how far fear and greed can push someone. I hope this video helps you see his character in a different light, and realize that, at least in terms of writing, he was almost on par with Sang-woo.